welcome everyone to Collide. And we are so excited to be here. We've got a great panel today. And we are going to be talking today about cross-industry applications, the risk and reward for realizing the potential of AI and advanced analytics. I think everyone here who's excited about AI and advanced analytics knows how hard it is to say those words, but then put them into action. And I think we're going to get some great information from our panelists on just how we make that happen day to day. I'm going to first say this caveat here. Let's see. The comments that are made here do not reflect the views and opinions of their respective organizations. So I have to throw that out there first. But now with that said, I'm going to let each of the panelists introduce themselves and give you a little bit of information about their background in AI and advanced analytics.
Hi everyone, good afternoon. My name is Amelia Burke-Garcia. I am a program area director and director for the Center for Health Communication Science at NORC at the University of Chicago. NORC, if you're not familiar with the organization, is an independent nonprofit research institute affiliated with the University of Chicago. And in my role, I direct a body of work focused on how we use communication science to improve people's health and well-being. So that can take the form of research to understand people's knowledge, attitudes, beliefs, behaviors around a variety of topics. It can take the form of message and materials development, campaign development, and then evaluation, measuring impact. I personally have done a ton of work focused on opinion leadership and sort of who in our sort of social networks are persuasive to us as it relates to health, and have focused a lot of that work on social media influencers, but recently have been working to expand that to AI. And so I'm working on a project with a collaborator of mine that we're calling Health Communication AI, and we might get into that a little bit later. So thanks.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, my name is Giang. I'm the Director of Customer 360 at IHG Hotel and Resorts. My background is kind of more on the technical side. I started with math, statistics, became an analyst, do a lot of different types of analytics, from revenue analytics, customer analytics, loyalty, revenue analytics. So I've seen actually over the years how the data science and analytics has evolved over time. I'm really glad this is the kind of latest and greatest wave of our kind of forefront of the PR side of data science. So I'm very excited to have the conversation today of the latest advancement.
Thank you. And I'm Frances Boykin. I'm with AT&T. I am there as a director of advanced analytics. So I have some advanced analytics work that I have supported, as well as Gen AI. Most of my work is with data and the technology, the architecture end of Gen AI. But hopefully we'll have some great information that comes across here. And as I said, we'll be exploring the challenges, the opportunities from different industries, and how those industries attack the difficulties of deploying and managing AI and advanced analytics projects. So let's jump in. All right. First question, and I'll throw this out. How do the risks associated with AI vary between highly regulated industries and those with more flexibility, and how should those organizations approach this in their AI strategy? I'm going to start with you, Amelia, because you said healthcare, and that always tweaks my interest, because how do we do advanced analytics, or any kind of analytics, where we still support the needs of keeping things private with patients and their doctors and so forth?
Yeah, sure. So just to be really clear, the work that I do is, I can sort of speak to this from the perspective of health, public health, and I think that there are elements of this that that relate to healthcare and the patient-provider experience and relationship. As well, a lot of my clients are actually federal clients. So that's another layer of regulation that I think comes into play here. So I think the way that that I've been thinking about this, and I think some of my colleagues have been thinking about this, really has to do with a few things. And the first is that we have to just, at a very basic level, this may sound very simplistic, we have to know the regulations, right? And I can imagine that as AI evolves, so too will those regulations, because there's new things that we're encountering as AI kind of becomes a bigger part of our work and our daily lives. I also think that we have to, I think, one of the areas that is where there's not like a lot of consensus yet, but there's a lot of conversation, is measurement and testing. And we have to make sure first that, there's sort of the no BS principle, right? So these tools, when it comes to health and well-being in people's lives, they can't hallucinate. We can't give people inaccurate information with which they may make decisions about their health that could impact their life. So absolutely one of the big challenges is the issues around hallucination. The other big issue that we face is with sort of robustness and also with fairness, right? So we're already seeing challenges with issues of bias. And yet these tools need to support all people from all walks of life. And it's most important, I think, and this is where one of the sort of core tenets of what we're doing with health communication AI is ensuring that we're coming from a place of inclusion and really trying to mitigate bias, because there are challenges with that in terms of how the technology works. But we have to start from that place, because if we don't start from that place, we're going to regress to the mean. We're already seeing that some of the tools that have come out in terms that do health communication or aim to support health communication, they're failing at that, right? So they're using avatars that are of white people. They're English only, and then they're not giving accurate information. So there's layers of areas where these tools are not performing well. I would also just say that, and for health in terms of robustness, right? We've got so many topics and issues and complexities with what we do in health that these need to work for all, and yet, it's really important to put those guardrails up so that you can actually use a model to help a variety of different people with lots of different types of questions. I think that there are lots of opportunities for use in healthcare as a supplement to what providers can offer. And I share this just as an anecdote. I've talked to some my husband is Hispanic, and so I've spoken with his family about, their openness to engaging with AI in the healthcare system. And in speaking with them, they were very excited about the opportunity. And so I think that there's an interest there to supplement what they may not get through in a conversation with a provider, and especially the opportunity with Gen AI to provide more empathetic messaging to people. There's some real opportunity here that I think is exciting. The other place I think that is really important to think about is evaluation and measurement, and we don't really have consistent definitions of things, ways of measuring things. We haven't really come to consensus on what accuracy means. We haven't come to consensus on what, how much risk are we okay with? How if we can't get to 100% accurate or 100% no risk, what is that level of that we're comfortable with? And for health, those are some big questions, because that will result in impacting life. And then I think it all comes down to, which is really important, is where the rubber hits the road is implementation. And for government, for health, where do you implement these tools? Are they behind your firewalls? Are they in the cloud? Are they on-prem? And then what are the costs associated, and how does that impact us? So those are just some of the really big things that we tackle in regulated industries.
Awesome response. And just to tag on to that, there's the issue of with especially Gen AI, it's the inputs, right? where do you get those inputs? How much of those inputs do you get? Because what you get out of it is only going to be as good as what you put into it so that you can leverage that. Did you have anything to add?
I would also add where it leaks to, right? Because that's one of the biggest concern when Gen AI came out is my records going to be just another piece of data that everyone's going to train on, right? And then that will become somehow available, publicly available. I think that one, and overall, I think with the recent report of AI, especially Gen AI, it just highlights the fact that we have to focus on governance and ethics, because not often enough, especially coming from a math and technical side, I don't think we think enough about those area where you have a very powerful tool in your hand. What do you do with it, right? Today, you can actually do a lot with it, but ultimately, where is the boundary? How do we, as an industry, agree on where's the limits? And I think those are the very open discussion right now that is not being discussed or implemented enough. Not only at a macro level, at a country level or global level, but also at a company level. Even within the company, we have pockets of different data scientists that will do different projects, right? Some will push the boundaries more than the others, and some will work very closely with privacy and governance. For example, for me personally, I really actually enjoy working with privacy and governance because, to your point, you are supposed to know the regulations. Unfortunately, the regulation, I'm not very good at it, right? So I would rather defer to the expert. And when I explain it to them what I'm trying to achieve, it's almost like another filter, another check of what are you trying to accomplish? And is it a valid approach, as well as is it necessarily? Do you need to throw in 500 different features, or 200 of them are like crossing the boundaries that don't even increase your R squared by 5%? Just giving an example, right? So I think that is, for me, where I think data scientists should be working more closely with regulators, understanding where they come from, privacy and governance. I think those are very crucial. Going back to what you mentioned also about bias, with Gen AI, the good thing, I think, is everyone is kind of focusing on the hallucination, the impact of it, the application of it. I think somewhere in there, we kind of start forgetting about advanced analytics. We start the limelight is on Gen AI now. It's not on AI and machine learning anymore. It's not about the core data science. So going back to the point about biasing, about data availability, is the data quality even any good, right? So any model can spit out any recommendation. And it's the data scientist's responsibility to check those. But if you just apply any AutoML today, there will be a result coming out. Good or not, no one really can tell, to be honest, right? So it is actually the data scientist's role to fact check it, to validate it, and create tools to do even some of those jobs. So I think there are a lot to discuss there. There are a lot of rewards that everyone is trying to get at, but I think it would be really good to take a step back and think of some of the implications and some of the risks associated.
Awesome. I love the fact that you brought up global privacy issues, because most of our companies are global companies. So it's not just what are the regulations for Georgia. We need to understand if we're sharing, if we have customers who cross boundaries into Europe, what are the responsibilities for privacy and security across those boundaries. And we have to, as data scientists, understand that and support that. So you kind of jumped into my next question,
Well,
which was around what do we think about those rules and regulations and how we implement them. And the fact that we really don't have, I know that they're trying to build a global policy, but I don't think that they finished that yet.
it's a very complex area where I think, and this goes back to where actually we defer a lot to the privacy team, because the rule continues to change, right? So every state has their own opt-in, opt-out, CCPA, all those regulations. And countries, right? Europe has their own GDPR. China has a whole different set of regulations. So I think it's very complicated. From our perspective, we try our best to work with the team and segment it by countries and where it's needed. But it's very whole another can of worms for sure.
Yes, I'm really looking forward to seeing those new policies that they're going to come out with. I took a course during the pandemic just on policy, and it was crazy, all the policies, the different policies, as you mentioned, from state to state, not talking about country to country. So great response there. So let's jump ahead. So we understand that there's the policies, making sure we don't have hallucinations in our output. We even heard some horror stories about the police. I think law enforcement was trying to use some Gen AI to help them recognize, using cameras to help imaging, to help recognize people who may have committed a crime, and that didn't work out so well. So we do know that there's cutting edge work that's being done there, but there's a lot of work that needs to be done to make those applications worthwhile. So what are the most common barriers that you see in adopting AI solutions within your organizations, or that you've seen in the news or across the world today?
Yeah, so I think in public health, in the federal government, we are not always the first penguin, right? We're not the ones on the edge doing the most innovative things. And so I think part of the challenge for the health communication field really has to do with knowledge, with even understanding all that comes with all of this, right? And that's been a big push that I've been doing in my own work around sort of doing some education of the field and why we should be participating now. There's a lot of evidence, right, around, if you look historically back in terms of engaging in just like the advent of social media, we now, 20 years later, see the unintended consequences of not engaging actively over the years with understanding the effects of engaging in social media. It's not to say social media causes some of the challenges we've seen with youth mental health or bullying or body image, but we see, this went unchecked for so long. We haven't invested in studying it. We haven't invested in understanding how people interact and use these tools and engage in these spaces. And we see this now 20 years. It's not going to be another 20 years to see what the effects of engaging with AI is for kids and young adults and different communities of people. We need to be doing this now. We need to be investing in longitudinal research. We need to be looking at how are youth engaging in these spaces? How is this changing how they interact interpersonally with people? And what messaging and what channels and how can this be helpful, but also where are the harms and what can we be doing in the meantime to put in place supports to make sure that kids and families and communities and providers have what they need to deal with issues as they encounter them in their everyday life. So we're never the first penguin. I really want us to be active voices and engaged in this process. I think there's fear, and I think that there's a lack of knowledge and sort of maybe a lack of how do I even start to understand a lot of what this is and what this means. And so I think, and I would also say, we are public sector industries, so we don't often have the money that private does, and so there's a resources issue here too. I think that those are some of the big challenges we face.
Anything to add?
Well, actually, I don't know where to start with because there are so many barriers over the years. It's almost a standard question whenever you like get an interview for a job is how do you overcome all the barriers, right? And so I would start with which I think is the highest impact and actually has the highest available capability to overcome it, is showing the value. It's very often you will bring a solution, a data science solutions, an AI solutions, without a solid ability to say, I will make 100 million next year by implementing this, right? Now, sometimes when you start implementing it, you will get 200 million, right? But before implementing it, to get through the door, to get the buy-in from the leader, you cannot, with a very good conscience, right, say that I know for sure you will make this much. So I think bringing the value to the business leader and tie it to the objective of their goals is the key, and also the hardest barrier to overcome. So you have to, there are a few ways to address this. You have to work with various leaders. You have to have a representation of your leader or yourself with the higher level leaders to really showcase and demonstrate the ability and get the buy-in to even be able to show the value that you can bring. Once you start that, you need to show the actual value of your work. Once that is done, it's almost over, right? Because you will see that everyone will love an incremental value. Almost no one will not. Now, probably I will touch a little bit on the cases where people actually don't care about making more money, because it does happen. But I think that is the key. For me, number one is showing the value for data science. And the root cause of showing actual good value for the data sometimes is in the people itself, right? A lot of data scientists, a lot of analytics people will come from, you do the math, you calculate it, you have a new techniques that you do better forecast, you do better prediction, but you lack the ability to translate that into business. You cannot communicate that this is going to be the impact. If you bring to a leader and say, my forecast is going to go from 88% to 95%, they will say, okay, so what, right? But I think, again, that talent is not just about the core skills, but also the soft skills. How do you translate that into a business context and business value? I think that's the biggest barrier. There will be also, from a people perspective, there will be also people who have bad experience before. They have seen it fail before. Maybe 5 years ago, there were a prediction model created by some random people that don't have a very strong foundation from a business perspective, that did not show a good value. That is a deterrent for a good implementation of AI. So I think getting some of that through is very important. And finally, I would point out, actually now, especially with Gen AI, everyone is afraid of training the machine that replaced you, right? So I think the education and the communication for getting through that and have almost a solution for that, because you actually have to acknowledge some of that. It is actually true. 100 years ago, we don't have a PC, then there were a lot of different type of jobs. Now we have a PC, now we have new technologies. There will be more different jobs, but there will be impact on the workforce. latest example is Salesforce coming out with Agentforce. Essentially what it's saying is that, well, you know, your call center can maybe be automated, right? So there will be people really concerned right now. I don't think within the data science community we are at that level yet, but imagine 20 years from now, there will be a machine that comes say, hey, whatever you're predicting, we can do it 10 times better, 100 times faster, immediately. We don't need you anymore, right? So I think acknowledging that itself is very important. And then you have a solution for people. With you being part of the solution, you will also be able to grow yourself, grow and get into where the future is, right? Because if you don't constantly, especially in this day and age, if you don't constantly upskilling, you will be left behind. So I think those are the things that I often bring up to mitigate some of that, but it's still a challenge. And you know, that's why it's always, there's a lot of barriers over the years to get a lot of these implemented.
Awesome. Because of the role that I have at AT&T, one of the challenges that I've seen that has really been a struggle is data. So a lot of organizations, especially if you're like an AT&T, where you've had many acquisitions, many mergers, data is everywhere. And like I said earlier, you're only going to get as good out of it as what you put into it. So I also just want to throw that out there. I think data is a big obstacle for many corporations as they try to implement these models, whether they're Gen AI or traditional advanced analytics. So I just want to throw that out there as well. All right, awesome. So in industries where data sensitivity is a key concern, what practices can be put in place to ensure that AI models are secure and trustworthy? We've kind of touched on this a little bit, but digging a little bit deeper into what do we actually do to make sure? What practices do we put in place? I think we mentioned earlier governance. I know at AT&T we have a Gen AI governance team, and that team, like you said before, has multiple organization leadership on that team, and that's how we proceed. But any other suggestions? Or
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. We have very similar things in my organization, sort of a working group and policies that we've put in place. And as a research organization, we're also creating private sandboxes where staff can actually upload data safely and securely and not worry about it being taken up in a way that it would violate terms of service for access to those data or use of those data. So that's just one other thing I would add to the list.
So I will actually paraphrase a conversation I had earlier on a roundtable about application of AI. And because technically I'm from the industry, I would say it's not as strict as healthcare or bank. So this one is a paraphrase from a banking industry, right? Where you have the credit fair, I'm sorry, CF, I forgot the word, but it's the customer fair credit lending or something like that. And what they are working on is actually a way to be able to detect and evaluate models, fairness, and unbiasedness. So not only you need to have human oversight, human understanding of how your model and how your AIs impact people, but also you need tools to do so. Because now everything is going so fast. You are personalizing so quick. Human alone is very important. Actually, it's number one importance. But you also need to equip the person with the right tool to do that work as well, because the demand is exploding. So FYI, if you're looking for a change of career, right, might not be a bad area, because I think it's actually it's almost an untapped area in a lot of industries that will become very, very needed in very near future. So.
Yep, I totally agree with that. So let's jump forward a little bit and talk about something that's near and dear to my heart, and that's innovation and creativity. So as we start to look at AI and advanced analytics, how can we leverage that for creativity beyond the technical aspects of what we do today? I'm in selling cell phones, so that's a pretty straightforward. But what about creativity and creativity of thought and innovation? How can we leverage AI and advanced analytics for that? Any thoughts there?
Something very quick, maybe. I think we can learn from Elon Musk. We can read more fiction, and we can be more creative and look at some of the things that in the past were fictional. Now it's becoming reality. So you actually can apply a lot from fictions 50 years ago, 20 years ago into today's technology. I think that is reality now. Like everything technology-wise, if you pull out your phone, everything is fiction now, right? So from a creativity standpoint, we are at the cusp of almost a new type of tools now with Gen AI. AI, machine learning has been there, kind of established, we kind of know, but Gen AI is really an untapped area. So there are so many, if you are in tech, if you want to create apps, if you want to create different solutions, it's almost an untapped area where everyone can be free. So the way that I look at it is we are all artists now with data as our canvas. So
I like that. I'll just add that, from a health communication standpoint, we are regularly challenged, and we saw this, and you probably all experienced a version of this in the pandemic, that addressing the amount of health-related questions and concerns in ways that are both accurate, tailored, and empathetic, and doing it at the scale that we see today is almost impossible. I mean, it's impossible for a human to do. And so there's just such there's widespread misinformation, disinformation, but even if you sort of take that out of it, just confusing or rapidly changing information as it relates to health, and especially around something that might be new or where the science is evolving, it can be incredibly confusing. And so for me, in the work with health communication AI, this is a huge opportunity for us to be able to leverage evidence-based information that's publicly available, that's peer-reviewed, that's from trusted sources, pulling in those data, and creating a model that can answer questions from people anywhere, anytime, no matter where they are in the world, and doing this at a speed and a scale that we've never, as humans, been able to do. So this might not be creativity. I loved your comment around canvas and artistry. I'm thinking about this as revolutionizing and reimagining how we do health communication for the future. And it gives me a lot of hope, because I think that we've encountered so many challenges in the realization that we just don't have the tools in our toolbox, or we haven't had the tools in our toolbox. And this is actually something that could really change the way we communicate health information.
I love that you brought up tailored, because whether you're selling cell phones or building out health solutions or banking solutions, I think today what we need to do and what we are aspiring to do is tailor what we do to our customers, and even in an individual way. So we might call them personas. We are looking at different cohorts of customers, and then even breaking that down to personas, so that we can really dig into and delve into what can we do to service not just everybody, but this pocket of customers here. So I love that you brought up tailored. Awesome. Moving right along. So as we've talked about privacy, we've talked about creativity, we've talked about all of the ways that we have to move past the obstacles to build out AI and advanced analytics. But have you had an opportunity to cross-collab across industries as we bring all of this new innovative technology and cool stuff to the surface, and then leverage that for not just what we do in our own little universe, but also build it out across universities. Sorry about that.
Yeah, so for me, I think a lot of that comes from personal experience, working in different industries, as well as teammates, different industry experience. There's always learnings, and there's always cross industry standard. I think there are a lot of, say, 10 years ago, it was a very common examples of what not to do, with sending people pamphlets about pregnancy tests or baby supplies, right? If you all remember that 10 years ago, that for me is an example of cross-industry learnings that watch out, right? And being in, so I used to work for pretty large companies with hundreds of years of experience. They have a lot of institutional knowledge, where when I go to IHG, I can bring a lot of that together. So I think that from a personal perspective, I think that's what we all should do. Bring our own experience from other industry and think a little bit more than our day-to-day and apply some of that learnings that we had. Some people will actually do that a little bit too much, maybe. But having a good balance of applying what you know in other industry is actually very valuable. And then, of course, on top of that, you know, conferences like this is always helpful, and we actually learn about what other people are doing and where the value is at, right? So going back to the value is often when you go to conferences or when you learn about cross-industry case studies, you will see where the nuggets are. You will see where the value is. And you can apply that to your own industry, your own company, your own function, right? So I think those are the great cases where, for me, I look for the values. I look for what are the applications that I can use today that will bring more values or incrementality to my organization. So.
Yeah, and I think that this is probably one of the biggest opportunities and possibly like one of the most important things for this field. And I say that because, again, public health, health communication, we need to be engaged in this process. We need to have a voice and a say. A lot of these tools are not necessarily being built for the health context right now, and that's right. That's okay. But the fear is that then we'll be, you know, years behind what's going on, and those tools won't exactly work for our purposes. And so I think that getting engaged, you know, coming to events like this, meeting with other people, talking with other people, getting engaged in organizations, getting engaged in different communities is super important right now for that kind of cross-fertilization of both ideas and use cases and business cases. And then I also would just add, you know, you made a really interesting point earlier around like the data scientist being kind of the fact checker. I think in health, there's an opportunity there. We've got so many medical and health experts. They can be working on these tools and one, reducing burden, and two, ensuring accuracy from that sort of health perspective. So I just think that there's a lot more work to be done here, and I think it's really exciting.
And all great points. One thing that we didn't talk about, I don't think, is monetization. And I just want to throw that out there. I know it's not, maybe not politically correct to think about the fact that we like to sell what we have to make money off of it. But one of the things that I have seen is discussion around, hey, I build something in my industry that gives me an offshoot of information that I can then use to make money. So there is an opportunity to monetize what we do in not just Gen AI, but also in advanced analytics as well. So just wanted to add that little tidbit.
I would just connect that to your earlier point on data and like the good data that goes into these models. Like that's an asset, and that's a monetizable asset. And so not only do you get a better model tool, whatever it is you're building, but you actually then have that to potentially license out, I think.
And one of the things that AT&T did, and I can speak about this because it was in the news, and we had something called the feature store, and we built it for our use, and then we actually leveraged it outside of AT&T. And I think our CDO, leader of CDO, was interviewed on Good Morning America. And so I know that it's been already discussed out there. But that's the sort of thing that we can, as companies, as organizations, we can leverage. We can build cool new tools, and then we can sell those tools to other organizations and industries. All right. So I think we have a few more minutes, and I think we have time for one more question, and then we'll probably go into our lightning round. So how should, and this is a big one, how should organizations approach scaling AI? So solutions so that they can be transferable across industries with different data landscapes as well as compliance requirements. So, and I want to put a twist to that. How do we even scale them in-house? Because I think that's the first thing that we have to do before we even go outside of our own organization or industry. Any thoughts on that? Take it first.
Sure. So scaling advanced analytics, in my personal opinion, is not an easy job. The reason is because there's not enough focus, or there's not enough tolerance for good models. Sometimes when you hear scaling, you just want to more, right? You don't care actually, and what I meant by you is maybe executives, or maybe from a leadership perspective. They may think, okay, well, I know that AI is very hot. I want to scale it. And I know that there are pockets of models today that are working very well. I want more of those, right? Or there's a hot new trend of Gen AI. I want that, right? That leadership and that type of thinking is somewhat a little bit dangerous. And the reason is because you can scale that. You can get more of the models, but you sacrifice on the quality. When we think about scaling advanced analytics, we want to make sure that the quality of the scaling is good. And sometimes it will be a little bit slower. Sometimes it's a little bit somewhat, naysayer. You might come to us and we may say, we can do that, but we cannot do that right away. Or we would say that, we don't think there's enough there. I think saying no for just mass scaling is important. And it goes back to, you have to have a very intimate knowledge of the model. You have to have a very intimate knowledge of the business and really drive the outcome of the model. I cannot stress enough having the combination of those two and focus on the actual result of the model. Don't just build models for the sake of building models because it's fancy, right? Or because of a team wanting it. I think for me, that is the way that I look at it, the way that somewhat our team approach it. So I would probably keep it there.
And I would just add, I think that's like such good points, right? About like, what is your purpose? Like, what do you want to achieve here? And at NORC, I'm in health, but NORC does work across a variety of sectors. We have transportation work, we have education work, we have justice work. Health is where we see sort of the ability to kind of build and adapt early. It just from the use case of we're doing a lot of direct-to-consumer communication. There are people who are interested in testing and refining these models for a variety of audiences and topics and things like that. But for me, I think internally, the investment in developing this and the scalability becomes part of that business case, because there are other use cases across our work where building what we're building can be then trained for other purposes. And so your investment over here benefits you over here. And so having that conversation with our executives, I think is helping to make the case that this is a direction that we should be investing in for the long haul.
All very good points. And one of the things that I meant to mention earlier is people. A lot of times, scaling and building out, you have a small group. So you mentioned earlier about cost. And so I know in some cases, executive leadership will say, you can have these 5 people, and you guys go do Gen AI and just work on it, right? Well, it's hard to build, scale, review, measure with 5 people. So I think some of the problem too that we have with scaling internally is just not enough resources to make that happen. So, all right. So I think this has been an awesome conversation. We've had some really good ideas around opportunities, innovation, what we can and can't do from a privacy perspective around AI and advanced analytics. And with the last few minutes that we have, I'd love to do a lightning round where, in one phrase, what's the most important takeaway when balancing AI's risks and rewards across various industries? Now, that's a mouthful there, but what are your thoughts around how we leverage AI across our industries today and in the future, if you have some ideas around that?
I'll go first. My phrase is, there's just as much risk with not doing something than with doing something.
Awesome.
I don't have a catchphrase. I just have, I think, 2 things. For me, it's value and human. Focusing on value, we talked about already. Human is actually thinking of it from a human perspective, right? So both as the creator as well as the consumer of the AI.
Awesome. So my catchphrase is actually not mine. It comes from Steven Seagal, a Steven Seagal movie. Telling my age there. So there is a Steven Seagal movie called Dark Territory, and it's when they're on a train, and the bad guy has this CD, and it's got this innovation, and you put it in, it's got all the codes to like annihilate a whole city. And on the CD, it says, "Chance favors the prepared mind." And I use that for everything that I do. Chance favors the prepared mind. And for me, that just means that we have to be eyes open, ears open to what's coming, what's needed, who the people are that need these things. And whether it's Gen AI or advanced analytics or anything else that we do in life, I think that chance favors the prepared mind as we go about making those things happen. So thank you so much.
Thank you.